What if I told you that one engine, just one, may have quietly ended 70 years of American control over the world's fighter jets? Not a missile, not a stealth upgrade, not a secret radar, an engine. Because this week, something happened that defense insiders understand instantly, but most people completely missed. Rolls-Royce just rewrote the rules of military aviation, and they didn't need to fire a single shot to do it. Officially, they announced a new engine variant called the EJ230. But unofficially, this was a declaration of independence. Independence from Washington, independence from Pentagon vetoes, independence from American export control power. And the aircraft at the center of this storm is the Gripen E. For years, the Gripen had one fatal weakness: not its radar, not its weapons, not its combat record, its engine. Every Gripen ever built relied on American technology. That meant one thing: no matter who bought it, Washington had final say. On sales, on upgrades, on spare parts, on software, on exports. Even Sweden had to ask permission. That changes now, because the EJ230 is not American, not partially American, not quietly American. Through subcontractors, it is fully European, no GE engine, no ITAR restrictions, no Pentagon oversight, and suddenly the Gripen E becomes something entirely new, not just a fighter jet but a political weapon. Here's why that matters. For decades, the United States hasn't just sold fighter jets, it has sold leverage. When countries buy American aircraft, they don't just get capability, they accept permanent dependence. Spare parts, maintenance, software updates, weapons integration, all of it flows through Washington. And when politics turn ugly, that dependence becomes pressure. We've seen it before: export approvals delayed, upgrades reconsidered, support quietly slowed. Defense becomes diplomacy. Jets become bargaining chips. Now imagine what happens when that leverage disappears. That's exactly what the EJ230 does. For the first time, Sweden can sell Gripen fighters without asking Washington for permission. Britain can supply engines without State Department approval. Customers can upgrade, modify, and operate without fear of a political phone call from across the Atlantic. That's why defense ministries are paying attention. Especially Canada. Canada has been stuck in a painful dilemma for years. On one hand, the F-35. On the other, sovereignty. Because buying American jets means tying your national defense to American political moods, and those moods haven't been exactly stable. Tariff threats, trade wars, insults, even jokes about Canada becoming the 51st state. That's not abstract politics. That's strategic risk. And now Canada sees something it didn't have before: a fighter jet it can own completely. Here's where things get uncomfortable for Washington. Rolls-Royce doesn't just build engines in Britain. They already have major aerospace facilities in Montreal. That means something extraordinary becomes possible. Gripen airframes built by Canadian industry, engines built in Canada, maintenance done by Canadian technicians, upgrades decided in Ottawa, not Washington. No American choke points, no export vetoes, no software locks. A fighter force that answers to one flag. And that's why this announcement sent shockwaves through defense circles. Because once one country breaks free, others follow. Ukraine is watching, Latin America is watching, Southeast Asia is watching. Everyone who's ever worried about what happens when politics interfere with national defense is watching. And this is only the beginning. Because the EJ230 doesn't just free Gripen politically, it transforms it technically too, and that's where things get even more interesting. We'll break down why this engine doesn't just remove American control, but actually makes the Gripen better, faster, and more dangerous. And why past evaluations suddenly don't mean what they used to. So before you scroll away, ask yourself this: if you could defend your country without asking anyone's permission, wouldn't you? Why the engine changes everything. Let's talk about power. Because politics aside, no Air Force buys a jet just to make a statement. Performance still matters, and this is where the story gets even more disruptive. The EJ230 is not a downgrade, not a compromise, not a good enough alternative. It is stronger. The engine is based on the EJ200, the same core powering the Eurofighter Typhoon. That engine has already proven itself in combat conditions, high-speed interception, and sustained operations. But the EJ230 goes further. More thrust, better acceleration, higher sustained speed, improved climb rate, better power-to-weight ratio. That matters in real combat, not PowerPoint presentations. The Gripen E already supercruises with its current engine. With the EJ230, it does it faster, longer, and with heavier weapons. That changes mission profiles. That changes fuel planning. That changes engagement options. And here's the part most people don't understand. When Canada evaluated fighters in 2021, Gripen scored far below the F-35. Those numbers are now being repeated endlessly as if they are permanent facts. They are not. Those tests were done with the wrong engine. They didn't account for future electronic warfare upgrades. They didn't account for new weapons integration. They didn't account for lessons learned in Ukraine. Most importantly, they didn't account for the EJ-230, change the engine, and the aircraft changes. Acceleration improves, range expands, combat radius increases, payload flexibility grows. Even small gains in these areas cascade into major operational advantages. And when you combine that with cost, things get uncomfortable. Gripen costs about half as much to buy, about a quarter as much to operate, requires fewer maintenance hours, needs smaller ground crews, can operate from short, dispersed runways. That's not just cheaper, that's survivable. Modern wars don't favor centralized air bases, they favor flexibility, mobility, and sustainability. Gripen was designed for that reality. Ukraine proved something else too. You don't need perfect stealth to win. You need adaptability. You need numbers. You need jets you can actually keep flying. That's why fourth-and-a-half-generation fighters are suddenly back in focus. And Gripen with EJ-230 becomes one of the most capable in that category. Now zoom out. If Canada buys 72 Gripens, that's 72 engines. If Ukraine buys 150, that's 150 more. Colombia already signed for 17. Thailand operates them. The Philippines is evaluating, Portugal is watching. Brazil builds them. Suddenly you're talking about hundreds of engines. That justifies local production. That justifies long-term industrial investment. That means jobs, not temporary contracts, but decades of high-skill aerospace work. Engineers, machinists, quality control, supply chain management. The kind of jobs governments fight to attract. And once those jobs exist, they don't disappear easily. Shutting them down becomes politically toxic, which is exactly why this matters so much. Because this isn't just a jet decision, it's an industrial strategy, a sovereignty strategy, a future-proofing strategy. And the Pentagon can't stop it. We'll look at why this terrifies Washington, how global markets are reacting, and why countries that once had no choice suddenly do. Stay with me. Why countries are quietly switching sides. Here's the truth, nobody in Washington wants to say out loud. The world is tired of asking permission. Not hostile, not anti-American. Just tired. Every time tariffs are threatened. Every time exports are delayed. Every time defense becomes a bargaining chip. Trust erodes. Ukraine understands this better than anyone. When your survival depends on steady supplies, uncertainty is deadly. The EJ-230 removes a major risk. No sudden parts freeze. No political leverage mid-conflict. Latin America is paying attention too. For years, countries there faced restrictions that had nothing to do with their security needs and everything to do with external politics. A non-American Gripen changes that equation. Thailand already operates Gripens and has long complained about restrictions. The EJ-230 offers upgrades without begging. The Philippines sees the risk clearly. Political winds change, alliances shift. Dependence is dangerous. Portugal sees the math. Why pay more, depend more, and get less control? Every country running these numbers reaches the same conclusion: capability matters. But control matters more. And here's the part that makes this irreversible. This is not a prototype, not a concept, not a PowerPoint slide. This is industrial reality. British engines, Swedish jets, Canadian factories. No single country can shut it down. Washington can pressure, it can complain, it can threaten. But legally, technically, industrially, they have no veto. That's what makes this moment historic. For 70 years, American engines quietly controlled NATO air power, not through force but through dependency. That era just cracked. We'll bring it all together. What Canada must decide, what this means for the future of air power, and why the EJ-230 might be remembered as the engine that ended monopoly control forever. The final choice, power or permission. Canada now faces a decision that goes far beyond aircraft performance charts. On one side, jets tied to Pentagon logistics, software controlled abroad, upgrades subject to politics, maintenance influenced by trade disputes. On the other, jets built at home, engines made locally, upgrades decided nationally, operations controlled fully. This is no longer about stealth versus speed, it's about autonomy versus dependence. The 2021 evaluation isn't destiny. It was a snapshot taken before a new engine, before new warfare lessons, before geopolitics changed. Run it again today and the gap narrows. Run it with EJ-230. Run it with updated systems. Run it with real-world combat data. The question becomes simple. Is slightly higher theoretical capability worth permanent dependence, or is complete sovereignty worth more? Rolls-Royce didn't just build an engine. They built an exit from veto power, from political leverage, from supply chain pressure. And once one country walks through that door, others will follow. That's why this matters. That's why this story won't go away. That's why defense analysts are suddenly very quiet. Because for the first time in decades, the Pentagon can't stop it. So here's the question for you. If you were responsible for defending a country, Would you choose the most advanced jet or the one no one else controls? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want the next breakdown, how this affects the F-35 program globally, subscribe, because this story is just getting started.